afternoon for this talk on eco-inclusive districts. I'll try to keep it a bit quick. So so the questions really, if you have questions, just ask them. You can go a bit more in depth afterwards. For my little presentation, I'll introduce a bit more about myself and my company I work for. The problem statement about eco-inclusiveness, what eco-inclusive districts are or can be, and then we go to the breakout rooms. So I will not introduce myself too much, but I worked in urban renewal before for the city of Amsterdam, which was almost a decade ago during my studies. It was very interesting. I learned a lot. But it's also very intriguing now to work on sustainable development at a urban development agency, AM. So I see a bit of the both sides. So one was a bit more social, and the others a bit more on really climate and housing development and implementing climate goals. So my background is real estate, but then I turned into a planner at the University of Amsterdam and focused on urban studies at Northeastern University in Boston. So kind of a broad scope already. What AM is doing, AM is an urban district developer. So we develop new areas, mostly in and around the Dutch cities. These are some examples. Today, I will not talk about these examples in depth because they're great projects and much to improve on those projects. Some things are really, I can talk about hours for these projects, but we have in the listening room a case study from a colleague of mine where we really are kind of like, working on this eco-inclusiveness and really are kind of trying to take it to the next step. There's also a lot of things we can improve. So wanted to know more about one of these case studies, so you can go to the listening room. So for AM, we are a commercial party. We do these projects and we have to make a profit, but we also have a societal agenda for these districts, for these areas we develop. These are the 5 agenda topics we have. So I work on the sustainability part, but we also have one pillar that's all about inclusive cities. So my work actually for the last 4 years or so, I've been working on furthering the energy transition in these areas, circular development, climate adaptation, sustainable mobility, and it's mostly climate mitigation and adaptation. But the social consequences of the solutions that we implement or that we choose are actually, there's not much awareness about this. And that's why I'm really excited that I could join Urban Arenas as a fellow, because there are so many people focused on climate adaptation and mitigation, but if you don't take into account potential negative effects that are social negative effects, then we are not on a good track. So for me, this was also an eye-opener that we should really look at that. Inclusive cities in the Netherlands, at least, we mostly look at the housing program for areas and new projects. So, for instance, many of our districts, there's 30% social housing. There's also other rental units, home ownership. So it's very diverse. Sometimes care, housing and care is in the project as well. So we make it kind of like inclusive in the way that there's different housing typologies and affordability levels, and that we create spaces also in these districts that are very open and accessible to all. For instance, here in the former prison area, which is now going to be a new housing district, where refugees actually find a job and learn how to work in the Dutch economy. So these are kind of very concrete ways how we work on inclusiveness. Participation is also part of that, but there's some points to improve on that. But we now know that inclusiveness and just cities are about way more things than only giving somebody for instance, an affordable house. It's also about feeling home and having access to amenities. So it's about way more topics than only this. So this is kind of, we are also looking as an organization how to improve on inclusiveness and just cities. So our problem statement is that the sustainability efforts I work on sometimes compromise the efforts we also take to make our districts more inclusive. So we should bring those together and make this more interdisciplinary approach. And also the most important organization we work with are the city governments, and they also steer really on sustainability targets, energy performance levels. They steer on the amount of housing units and affordable housing units. But the people from the social domain and social policy domain are not really involved in these new districts. This is part of the problem. So where to begin? Now, this is where eco-inclusive districts is a kind of new approach came into the world. So I invited people from different organizations who we work with to kind of talk about this problem, including a housing association, the city of Rotterdam, city of Amsterdam, and other organizations. And we already put it on the agenda in the real estate community. So the Provada Live, the picture you see here is actually the real estate conference in the Netherlands, where we put this to the fore. We also published an article on the district development portal, a well-read journal for people in real estate and people in urban development. But yeah, the next step is to kind of really implement this approach as well, and to actually learn how we can do it better in ongoing projects. We focus on the district scale because it's a logical scale. You have scale to sometimes you need scale for sustainability interventions, and also it's a nice scale to plan on. We have in the Netherlands a very large history on planning on the neighborhood level, the district level. And we have also a financial model already in place in the most of those projects, where, for instance, if you build more expensive housing with more profit, you can invest part of the profit back in the neighborhood. So this is very common in the Netherlands. So we use this model already to create more social amenities or other amenities that might not have a profit. So these are already tools that we have, but we can use it better, we think. The 3 points of eco-inclusive districts is that it all starts with interdisciplinary cooperation. Well, all these topics ties very well into the drivers for unjust cities that we identified in the past urban arena. So I put those the 10 drivers and the link to that document in the slide. And the interdisciplinary cooperation is one that was also identified earlier. And a big problem here is that that the social domain is not involved in planning new districts. So that you already start actually with a too narrow scope. The second one is participation. We have participation processes in place, but they don't have the desired outcome, because I think also they are not effective in creating ownership by the local community. And then lastly, we have some of this financial equitization on a district level, but actually there's much more we should change in how we work in district development. So it starts with getting different disciplines at the table before we start with new projects and urban district development or redevelopment. This means setting not only a sustainability agenda and a housing agenda, also those adjust, and this is really a part that is really missing in the current practices. When we do that, we can also involve stakeholders, local citizens, in really testing different solutions and see what solutions they come up with. And currently, if you include justice and inclusiveness in your goals for a new neighborhood or an urban redevelopment, then you will also use participation differently to create more inclusive and just solutions. And of course, in the end, the financial and governance model for these complicated projects should also facilitate more just and sustainable outcomes, and not only land value for the city or a profit for the developer, or more energy neutral houses, which is all a very important target for most municipalities. So we should really look at a model that facilitates other goals as well. I have 2 examples. So if you include the social domain in the agenda setting, in the target setting, you could create also goals and other parameters for these districts. And by setting different parameters, you also choose different interventions because you have also the other goals, these justice goals that you want to achieve. And this is then the district development model. If you include the social domain and have these more just and inclusive targets as well, this means that you also have a shared responsibility to meet those targets. So everybody should think about how their work benefits the different targets. You can only create just city neighborhoods if you work with the local community and create local networks and create spaces for those local networks and ownership. And this ownership needs different models. For instance, cooperative models, maybe more power to a neighborhood association, maybe more shared spaces. And you need an important driver to facilitate this. So this could be a development fund which is funded by the different public entities and private parties. And then you can also make use of funds that are used normally very narrowly after a neighborhood is done. For instance, after a neighborhood is done and there's poverty, then the social and welfare workers come in. But maybe we can prevent that from happening. And you can do that if you use funds in a different way and more integral. Let's see. I think I have a couple examples. So about a decade ago in the Netherlands, we were having this very interdisciplinary agenda approach for problem neighborhoods, neighborhoods with a lot of poverty and crime. And actually, the combination of funds worked quite well. Public, private, and citizen partnerships worked quite well. Building local stakeholder networks worked very well. But then there was also displacement and gentrification. So most of these neighborhoods, not all, but some of them are actually very hip right now and a lot of very gentrified. So that's just a negative outcome. But the interdisciplinary working was actually, we already learned how to do that in these neighborhoods. And I think we should get some of these lessons back. Cooperative models are also growing. We work with an organization that is stimulating and trying to upscale local mobility cooperatives for shared mobility instead of companies renting their shared vehicles in neighborhoods, that they do it with the local inhabitants, which has a good, investment goes back to the users, so they can, this is a very different model. You have more diversity and more freedom. And you can be more inclusive because it's more affordable than a commercial offer. But the problem is it's difficult to scale. So there's a big mobility issue, making it more sustainable, lowering car usage. So cities are also looking at companies that are just willing to get many cars in the city. So there's kind of some dilemmas here as well. And what we are doing in our projects is that we are creating shared spaces. For instance, in this project in Utrecht, in Overvecht, also a neighborhood with a lot of low-income households. We are creating 3 blocks with rental units. And in this space, we have very low rents for local entrepreneurs, NGOs, people with ideas. And by creating these spaces, we also hope to strengthen what's already in the neighborhood, give them a space, physical space. But also here is a potential risk that what if the ownership of the building in the future changes, and what will happen, and how do you allocate these spaces to the different organizations? So every solution we have, there's always some downsides or some risks. And we are working on different forms of participation. We are currently working with digital crowdsourcing, although part of the groups are hard to reach. Local ambassadors we do in the project and co-creation. We also have a golden ticket idea, which means that in a neighborhood, we at random send invitations to people to participate, and they also get a fee for that. And that's also because many people actually don't want to participate in. They just want a nice house and they have busy lives. Or some people want to participate, but really they can't because they have 2 jobs or have other barriers why they think they cannot participate. So yeah, we also look at ways to kind of overcome this problem. So this was very quickly an introduction to the idea of eco-inclusive districts. And I think right on time, right?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So before we move to the breakout rooms, there's been a couple of questions posted in the chat. So I'm going to read them to you. And Martin, if you can try to answer them quickly, that would be great. So we have enough time for a discussion. So the first one is whether AM, which is the agency that you work for, has a mechanism to capture and measure social goals in development projects.
Yeah, mechanism, not so much. We have kind of like KPIs, and these are also in every proposal. We integrate those as well. So project plans are evaluated not only on revenues, but also on these sustainability and other KPIs. But on the social side and the inclusive side, these are very weak and not, yeah, so this needs improvement.
Thank you. So the other question from Marilyn is whether eco-inclusive, so the project you're working for and what you're working, yeah, the whole mechanism also with the partners, whether you're linked to the donut economics in Amsterdam.
Yeah, I was prepared for that question because it makes a lot of sense, right? I actually was in one of the workshop rounds because the city of Amsterdam with Kate Ransford, they did many workshops on different levels, and they also invited stakeholders. So I was in one of those workshops, and I think it's a very nice model for maybe the first part for new area development or working on a neighborhood scale. But somehow it's in Amsterdam, it's also being difficult to kind of go beyond a good conversation. It's really in policy yet. So it's difficult to make it really smart somehow. So I'm definitely involved. I think it's something we can use, but it's also, yeah, somehow too abstract for real choosing interventions or making a plan based on the donut.
Okay, so there was also, thank you for the answer, Martin. There was also a clarification question about, you mentioned a golden ticket.
Yeah. It's kind of like a bold democracy idea. What if instead of voting or instead of giving everybody an invitation to fill in a questionnaire or go to a meeting and share their ideas, we'll just at random invite people, and then you get also different people at the table, or maybe a different mix, because in many projects and many urban participation programs you see kind of the same people, and some people are overrepresented, some people are not, some groups are not represented, and part of this, so it's kind of like a new way of who you can include. You do it more at random. You can do it as a side to maybe older forms as well, and you can also give a fee if people spend time to share their ideas, and then by doing that you can also acknowledge that the knowledge is as valuable as maybe a consultant you pay for, and also some people might not. It's also, I think it can also be debatable if inviting people to share their ideas or to make the plan better, actually, if then they should not get something back for that. So the still golden ticket idea is something you can use next to more standard participation programs.
Thank you. And I think this links very well to another question there was, which was, how do you measure which people are excluded at the moment from the development of districts? Yeah,
so there's one, what we always do very early already in when we start a new district development is that we see who wants to live there. And usually these are people that are looking for a house to buy or to rent in the private sector. And the people in the social housing, they have a different allocation system through the housing associations. So they're not really included in these long-term projects and participation processes. And this is problematic. So this is something we should solve. And it's very difficult to do that because they, when the social housing is being developed or redeveloped, only then these people come to the table, and then everything is already decided. So this is something we are kind of like looking for alternative ways to involve at least this group as well in making decisions when we plan new districts. And we, of course, we look at the people that reply and come to sessions or fill in the questionnaire. But usually it's quite a good mix for the other groups.
Thank you, Martin. And based on all these experiences, has AM generated any lessons learned about how to combat gentrification as the result of district development?
Yes, there's lessons learned. So one of them is that you can create when you buy a more affordable house or with a social unit or rent, you can make sure that if you sell or leave the house, that you will sell it first to a kind of like in-between organization, and that then part of the profit goes back to the neighborhood, and then the prices stay low. So this is a way of kind of battling the, I forgot the word, the people, the organizations that are investing in basically in housing, and then as soon as prices rise, they sell again, and that actually makes gentrification, speeds it up actually. And this is something, there are instruments you can use to slow this down at least. We are working with, and the other one is creating spaces for more like commercial spaces or non-housing spaces with lower rents. And by doing that, you can create possibilities for groups or for people that normally would not be able to have their business or initiative in the neighborhood because the commercial square meter prices are too high. So this is also something we are doing in different projects to kind of safeguard that there are spaces for different entrepreneurs, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll take two more questions and then I think we should move on. So the first one is whether you have considered using ISO 37101, which is the ISO, which is the standards coding system on sustainable development, as a sustainable development management system.
No. I will look at that, the ISO. It's in the chat, right? So no, I haven't heard about it, to be honest. I don't think it's really used in the Netherlands.
Okay, Miguel, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more in the chat, because also personally, I'm not aware of that. So I'll take the last question from Kristen, whether you are looking at what is already going on in the districts that you're developing in order to build on existing citizens' initiatives.
Yeah, so more and more. So a lot of the districts are not about demolishing and building new buildings, but about, it's almost acupuncture. So the case study my colleague will also elaborate on, it's a place where there's already a lot of housing in the neighborhood, but there's also space for to increase the number of housing and to change the neighborhood and make it more sustainable. So it's definitely there's already people or living next to the district we're planning, or already living in the area that is being kind of redeveloped or changed, or new houses are being added. And I have a colleague who is really specialized in kind of creating making a network. We call them actually also local stadmakers or neighborhood makers who are active in their own neighborhood. And these are the first people we come in contact with to see what are really the issues and what are really the problems. And they give always a lot of information that are not included in the briefing from, for instance, from a city government. So it's really, this methodology is really helpful, and we've just been starting doing that for maybe 1 or 2 years. So it's really new. But I'm really happy that we have now also really somebody who's really good in doing this.
Great, Martin. Thank you so much for taking so many questions in such a short time. If there are